to get on. And last week I do the magnetic snaps and turn locks for the Marilyn Wallet pattern. Now, wallets I did actually continue all the way through just because I made myself one to go to the new Demon Slayer movie. But we have the other wallet to put together, and I will show you how to do the second part of the turn lock or magnetic snap, because second part where you add the other part is done the same way for both a magnetic snap and a turn lock, and we'll do that at the end of this wallet, which will probably be next week or the week after, depending on how fast we go. So previously, last week, I had set up called for lining, but I actually it's right side up. That's what I do. So you sew the two of those together and then flip it right side out, put your Peltex in there, and then top stitch all the way around. And then you baste the top closed so you have that, and you make sure to mark your centers. And this will be play a big part later. So we have our trunk that I installed last week. So you can see we have the screws in everything. We probably will not get to adding this to the main body of the wallet today. We might, just depending. So what we're going to do today is we are going to make the main body, which includes your card slots, your pockets, like where you put money and stuff like that in. Um, I can go grab one in just a minute to show you. Um, and it holds up to 10 cards. It can fit cash that is completely unfolded, even though half the time I fold it if I'm not thinking about it. And I keep receipts in there. It also holds a pen in the middle. So we're going to have a pen pocket as well. So for today, yet again, this is the flap we started yesterday. Not yesterday, last Wednesday. So now we are going the next part. So in the pattern, there is actually the flap is not the first thing to be done. It's about halfway through, but I always do the flap first because, as I said last week, I put crazy glue or Gorilla Glue on the screws, and I want that to completely dry. So I always do my flap first. So unlike the order that the pattern has, I will always do my flaps first so I can already have the hardware ready to go for later and when I get to the body of the wallet done. So the next part of the pattern is making the card slots. Now, one thing you do with the card slots is that you cut a long piece. Of course, I'm not going to share the exact measurements. Hi, Amanda. But I have already this is the pattern tells you that you start at a certain measurement to fold it up. Let me grab the template. Now, this is something she tells you how you fold up your, ooh, sorry, y'all gonna see me fall because my rest of my pattern is up here, the template on my cutting table. I've been cutting out other bags today. That's fine. All right, so this pattern, she tells you how to make a template for your Maryland wallet. And what you do is that for that first part, she tells you two measurements to take and measure up, and you do the first fold. You take the second marking and you line it up with the first markings you make. Then you line the top of your template up. Let's stick this in here. If you can see, you line the template up with that first pocket, and that second, you bring up fabric to that second line. Hi, Annette. And you do this all the way down. And see, if you look, if I put my template in there, It goes all the way. I just went ahead and did this ahead of time because it takes time, and y'all don't want to see me sitting there at the ironing board pressing stuff. So after that, in your pattern pieces, it actually says interfacing for card slots. She has you then adhere your SF-101. I'm sorry, Melody. I'm not far in. I'm just explaining how to do the card slots, how we fold them, and the interfacing for it. So you have two pieces. Now, the reason you're saying, why do I space it out like this? This is how Lindsay actually has you space it out in the pattern. And what's going to happen is that we're going to divide this into two parts because the wallet actually has two pockets. So you're going to have two sets of card slots. That's why you have five things right now. And you're like, well, most card slots actually have top stitching. You could do top stitching. This pattern really doesn't need it. I've never really done it for mine, and this is the wallet I carry almost all the time. So, just to let me go grab the one I finished last week after I was done with y'all. Hold on, let me grab it real quick. So, so just to show, this is completed wallet from the one I did the magnetic snap on last week, and you can see I feel it pretty full. But we have the zipper and minus all the pertinent information, but there I have my ID wallet, all the cards, and then we have the pin. So so this is the one I kept for myself, and we will be doing the other one, starting it and hopefully getting through about half of it this week. All right, so now that we have the card slots, this is one of the big things. I'm going to take this over to my cutting table and measure the halfway point, and I'll explain why. Okay, do you put water on, or like spritz the SF-101 with water? If you spritz it lightly, it will adhere better, and also um, spritz the SF-101 before you lay it onto the material because it will shrink a little bit. Either that or spray it onto the put SF-101 on all the fabric you're using and then cut your pieces because otherwise it will cause your main material to shrink slightly depending on the fabric, and that causes the problems. Best thing is also if you're using SF-101, don't sew with it immediately because it will not adhere. You want to give it at least half an hour to let it stick. I use just a regular spray bottle to spray my SF-101, and then I lay it down on my stuff and I steam it till it's all good. And sometimes it does bubble, and I'll press it from both sides. I don't just press on one side. I press from both sides of the fabric, both on top of the SF-101 and on the fabric side. Except when I'm pressing SF-101 on vinyl, then that's a bad idea. Now, I do have a press, but for the most part, I usually use my iron for bag making. Um, I like my press for fleece. But, all right, I'm going to go mark this with a center mark. And you can use a pen. I actually have a heat transfer pen that I'm going to use. And I have my little handy dandy 6x12 ruler. I'm just going to mark the. Now, the reason it doesn't really matter if I use an ink pen or one that'll disappear when I iron it because this is going to be in the seam allowance, so it's not really going to matter. Just need to be able to see the line to do. That's the best way I can put it. I'll show y'all when I get back. But I wanted to be able to show you what I'm doing. But yeah, I just spray the SF-101. I don't spray the fabric. Spray the SF-101, then put it on there, then press from the SF-101 until I think it's pretty secured, and then I flip it over and press the fabric side. So if you can see, there's a center mark, and you can kind of see from the difference in light right here where there's no SF-101 there. Now, this does not mean this is where I'm cutting it or anything. Because now, let's find my piece of vinyl. So I have my piece of vinyl, and so now you can actually see where the hole I made last week and the dip. And I do this. This is not required, but this is what I do to help me get my ID out, or else it sticks to this vinyl. So, as you can see, this is a really pretty pastel rainbow, which happens to match this fabric very well. All right, so what we're gonna do here, you're gonna do this on the left side. We line up the top of the vinyl with that bottom pocket, and you line it up with the line right here. And we're gonna clip it in place, and I'll show you. We are going to sew, I promise. We're almost there. I'm just clipping it in place right quick first. I'll show you where I clipped it, and then we will sew it down, and I'll explain what I'm doing. So we are, takes me a minute to get it all lined up, and especially when clear vinyl likes to be slippery at times. All right, so we can see how yes, I know it's not clipped over here, but you can't use pins with vinyl and it not have holes. So we are going to actually, starting up here in the top left-hand corner, we're going to go down with an eighth of an inch seam allowance, go across, go back up, beside an eighth of an inch beside that line that we drew, all the way up, go back down, all the way down, all the way across, and back up again. And that's going to actually make our card slots. And then we will use that line to cut it apart. So I'm going to move y'all to the sewing machine so I can show y'all what I'm doing. All right. Okay, let's get that in place. Now, as you remember, I've told y'all I have a narrow foot. So I actually have this up against um, the machine. And I'm up against the machine, up against the edge of the fabric, which is an eighth of an inch stitch width with my narrow foot. So I'm going to sew down, and I will. Now you could just baste it, but as I said, if I ever have basting that is in the seam allowance, I usually will back stitch, especially right now since I'm going down the card pockets. And I am going to pull that final down just a tad. It moved up when I sat it there, which happens. That's not a big deal. So I just take off clips as I get to them, as per normal. Now, I will show you that there will be a little bit of excess vinyl at the end. Sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. So I'm going to kind of flip it around. So I am, like I said, sewing that at an eighth of an inch seam allowance. And we're just sewing this on. And this is probably the most uh, finicky of the um, card slots, at least in my opinion. Now, as always, um, double check Lynn's patterns. She will say that most of her patterns have a 1/4 inch seam allowance unless otherwise noted. This is no different, and most of it is sewn with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. But for like basting or in this case, stitching it in place, but I will show you once I'm done what it looks like. Y'all having any questions so far? Oh, one little bit more. Okay. And you are sewing through a lot of layers here, so it takes it, it goes, do I like those layers or not? Okay. Whoops. Apparently I'm knocking remotes off. All right, so just to show you, here is our fabric. As you can see, the vinyl extends a little bit below this pocket, but it is even up here. So I will just trim off this excess here. But what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to cut on this line, this middle line that I drew to make 2 card slot pockets. But as you can see, it actually is completed card slots. The whole thing doesn't fold down anymore. And we're going to make that even more secure in just a minute. So for the excess vinyl, didn't have to last week, which was an oddball. Usually have a little bit, like an eighth of an inch off. So it just depends. Okay. So now we have one with our ID wallet, our ID slot. And now technically you could put an ID slot on both if you really wanted to. I don't have 2 licenses that I need to keep up with. And I actually use every single one of the as I showed you, my wallet stays pretty full. So just to show you from the side what it looks like with all those cards in it. So that's what the finished one looks like with that. But what we're going to do next, we have the accent pieces. There's 2 card accent pieces, one skinny one and one wide one. So we have our skinny ones like that. And then we have our wide, this is our main body, so we'll set that to the side for right now. And we have our wide card accents. And what this is going to be on either side of your card slots. And one piece part that you will have that you have to cut for this wallet is you have 2 Peltex pieces. And so I've already adhered them, and these are a 1/4 inch from the edge. Now, if you're wondering, well, why did she draw that? That's so I could actually make sure they were adhered in the right spot. And so I can just follow on and stitch over that line and not have an issue because that's going to be my seam allowance. So I have that. And if you look, they are opposite of each other. That's because you have 2 different pockets that open different ways. So you need to make sure that you've got 2 that are mirror images of each other. Okay, so for this, we take the We're going to do the one with our ID wallet first. Makes it easier to see because you can see all the little stars on it, whereas my other one very definitely does not have vinyl here. So you want to get the one that when you turn it upside down, you have the Peltex on the right hand side of the SF1. And what we're going to do, we're going to clip this together. Now, I could use pins, I can use clips. With the Peltex, sometimes it's easier to have the clips holding it in place, especially when you get to the card slots, because it does get thick between that. And if you accidentally go through the Peltex as well, it gets very thick. Hopefully, I'm not going too fast for anybody. Y'all following along with me tonight? Y'all working on anything? Sorry, had to get something to drink. All right, so we're going to take this and I'm going to sew it together. Now, one thing to make sure before I sew this, just to show you, the Peltex ends a half inch from either side of the um, your card slots or the card accent. This is so it'll be out of your seam allowance later when we sew the wallet together. So I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's kind of funny is that I've been cutting lots of stuff since last week, but I haven't actually sewn anything else since I finished on this machine since I finished on up that other wallet. I know how that is. I have several pretty good sized orders. Oops, I'm gonna go back a little bit because I veered off my lines lately, which is why I have that line so I can make sure it's nice and straight. Oh, thanks, Annette. Yeah, actually, I'm trying to get a couple orders done so I can work on a doll costume for the state fair that is due like the second week of October. I've got all the materials, I just got to actually get it cut out. So, all right. So, what we're going to do, we've got the side. So, now we're going to take one of the small ones and we're going to clip it to the other side. Now, this does not have SF101 or any fleece or anything, so it is very flimsy, but that really won't matter. It's a Pemberley Threads, I think. I don't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but it's a 1860s dress, and I've got historic Civil War era fabrics to do with it, and if I have time, I'm gonna make the bonnet to go with it. Trying to push myself, things I've not done before. All right, so we have it clipped. Now, the main reason I'm using clips on this one is because this vinyl. I don't want to use pins. Actually, on the other side, I'll probably use pins. But this is at a 1/4 inch seam allowance as well. So we are just going to go up this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I mean, I guess you could put SF11. It just makes it really thick at the side, at the seams around the main part of the body of the wallet, so I wouldn't. But don't pull at your fabric while you're doing this either. But I'll definitely post the doll costume in the my sewing group when I get it done. All right, so we have this. So now we have this like this. We have our two. Now you can take it over to the iron, or I can take it over the iron, but I usually don't. I usually just kind of pull it and I push this down, and I will clip it under there, tucking the seam underneath this towards the away from the card slots, so that when I top stitch, the seam is gonna get in there so it'll lay flatter. But let's see, let's get this clip down all the way. I do put more clips doing this, and we are going to clip this right here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to top stitch right here next to the card slots in the purple part or the card accent. I'm going to top stitch at an eighth of an inch seam allowance all the way down. Well, that's good. Hopefully it seems like it's pretty easy read. I just have to actually sit down and cut out everything. And I'm going to put the crinoline underneath it, hopefully. Crinoline's my last thing I get done. I just want it to lay right, so I kind of want to do it. So, all right. So we are top stitching this at a eighth of an inch seam allowance. Make sure it's on the part that is not your card slot. So, and I am going through a thick part right here between the Peltex and the vinyl. Now, depending on what you want, you could do yet another top stitch on the edge. I usually don't because this looks still very pristine. I know some people do. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to fold back this one and top stitch it as well at that eighth of an inch mark. Hmm. Oh, I'm sure they do. Um, I try to make the garments, but I don't always have time, and they don't always judge both together. So if I have time, I will. The bonnet to me is more important than the undergarments. But if I have questions about her pattern, I may reach out to you if I'm not understanding her wording of something. If you don't mind, Melody. Okay. We are almost at the end. I know someone will ask me, this is top stitch now. Now you're like, oh, you got raw edges. We're going to trim this down. This is going to be trimmed down to 4 inches wide. So that's not an issue. So we're going to go ahead and do the other side of the card slots. Basically, the exact opposite as this one, because basically we're making a mirror image. So this is what the back looks like. You're only going to see it when you are lifting up your pocket. So this, you can just do lining. I want the pretty print on the. It is, well, the thing is, if you see this character right here that you can kind of see, um, better place to put it, right here. This is actually her kimono. This is the print her kimono is. So let's see if I have a better image of her. Not a really good image of her up close. So I thought there was one on. Oh, here it is. So that's this character right here. So if you see, it's the pink of her kimono. Oh, I love it. I love making funky stuff like this. The last one I made myself was a Tula pink one, and I had Tula pink fabric for the accent, but I just had a plain teal for the card slots. So yet again, we are going to take and match up the this time the left side of the card slots, and so your Peltex on the SF-101 side will be on the left side. This is the new Demon Slayer movie that came out last weekend in the box office, but that was actually kind of surprising. Most people didn't expect that. It was a very good movie. We went and saw it on Saturday with my husband and my 17-year-old, while my 8-year-old hung out with grandma. Now, also, one thing to explain. One reason I top stitch this side after I top stitch this side is so that it holds the card accent on the back there and it doesn't like bunch up weird or anything like that. Now, all of the way I do it is not exactly how Lindsay does hers, but I'm just telling you some of the tips and tricks I've learned. I have probably made at least 8 of these for myself. Like I have my Demon Slayer one I just made. I probably will switch out to um Muppet Haunted Mansion once Halloween hits. Just depends if I keep my Demon Slayer in longer or not. But I also have a Demon Slayer bag at the moment, so that may be the deciding factor. But I also have a Grinch one and a Snoopy one, lots of different ones. Basically, if I'm in the mood for a new one, I'll make me one to go with the new bag I'm making or something like has caught my eye. Alright, so we are getting this almost done. It does go really well. It looked like it was a pretty. That one looked pretty simple. Um, the dress is a little more. I don't remember. Hold on, I have it, but I can show you the fabric for it. I've got a plaid. Hold on, that I can grab. My pattern's sitting on my printer. Literally, I haven't got past that, but I have this print and this print go together that are from Marcus Brothers historical collection from the Civil War era. That should be fun. All right, so we've got this first one. So I'm going to attach my other side. Now, the biggest thing is making sure it's not upside down because, unlike the Peltex, it does have, and these are directional. Now, if you're not doing a directional print for your card accents, it really wouldn't matter. But since mine are a directional, I want to make sure that they are going in the right direction because I could sit here and do this and I wouldn't know until after the fact. And you can kind of see it would be upside down. Yeah, I believe the hat pattern that I'm doing is um the Molly, and I want to do like the straw version that somebody did. But I got to get a couple orders done before I can do it. So, as much as I want to do the doll dress right now, I can't. Okay. Right. Trim the thread. All right, so yet again, I'm going to fold my seam. So just so I can show you, here's the seam we just sewed. It's going to go over top of the Peltex that we sewed right beside. So basically, you're encasing that Peltex, making it very sturdy. And you can go press it on the ironing board or whatever, but I just kind of fold it over and clip it. And I find that works better for me than pressing it, because sometimes you press it and things get shifted, or you press the Peltex weird. So I'm just going a little bit at a time, getting these clipped here so I can make sure that seam lays flat over the Peltex. I need one more. So we have that clipped. So now I'm going to top stitch at an eighth of an inch seam allowance yet again. And so this makes it lay nice and flat and gives it that stiffness there. Plus, I plan on trying to make one more bag before I do the state fair. Probably another quilted bag. We'll see. Okay. So we have top stitched the one side. So now I'm going to top stitch the other side. Got random threads that are trying to pop through, which is always fun. Sounds like I'm sewing through Peltex again, but that's just the folds of the card slots. Okay, so we have the other one. So I'm going to take this over to the my cutting mat, and I'm going to trim both of these to 4 inches. So if you see, there are the two together. Like I said, the goal for today is just to get the body done, and then we'll put everything together next week. Right now, I am just at my cutting table measuring and trimming down. Which doesn't take a lot of time, but I find it's faster with a rotary cutter. A lot easier. Okay, and I've got to trim the other one. And that gets rid of all your excess, overhang, or anything like that, so that everything's smooth. All right, so we have that part done. All right, the next part, I said I actually saw that somebody had done it out of like a straw placemat, and I kind of really want the straw and where you don't have all the inside fabrics and it's got that stiffness. So I'm just gonna have to see what I can find and if I have time. but I think straw the hat makes the dress. All right. So the next parts we need, we're going to use these in just a minute. But the next parts is our lining pieces, two main lining pieces, which are just two pieces of that pattern piece. Then we have the pin pocket and the pin um, pocket lining. Now, if you see, I've already sewn the pin pocket over top of the pin pocket lining, but basically with the pin pocket, it's double this length and you fold it over and press it and then you baste it to the pin pocket lining. Now with that, I just want to, I usually go ahead and do it so I don't lose it. And I do this so, and as you can see, I've kind of fussy cut. I usually fussy cut all the time. I put a certain character or um, just to show I did one here. Um, you can see I did one here as well. With this one, I fussy cut a couple of characters. That's usually what I do on pin pockets, just because it's what I like. It's what I see, and I figured my customers like that too. So we have this. I've already, like I said, already you can see where I basted it together. What we're gonna do now is we are going to take one of the lining pieces and stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance yet again the pin pocket to the pin pocket lining, the lining piece, and we'll do that for both sides of the pin pocket. So make sure you sew your pieces with the pin pocket in the center. Now, if you notice I didn't clip it, that's fine. I just am following it along, moving things, making sure they're straight. You can clip it, pin it, whatever. And also, if you notice, oh, something's not quite straight or something like that, don't worry about that. Because we're going to trim everything up before we add the pockets. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take it and we're going to fold it open with the seam facing towards the lining, and we're going to top stitch on the lining piece 1/8 of an inch. Now, the next part is you are going to take this and using Lindsay's measurements, you will trim this down so that, because I will show you why in just a minute after I get both sides of the lining attached to the pin pocket. Actually, I can show you right now just to show you. So here's a pin pocket. Okay. Right now, if I were to put it, it's too big. If you look top and bottom, it's way too big. So we're actually going to trim this down so where this fits it a little more uniformly. But the thing is, since sometimes things shrink as you sew them, you don't want it to be the exact size and it possibly shrink and then your wallet pattern not be right. So we're attaching the other lining pocket or the lining piece to the other side of the pin pocket, twisting up my words. Okay. We have, okay. So we are going to top stitch yet again. We're going to fold that over and with the seam pressing towards being towards the lining piece. So I just pull that out so it's nice and flat. You can take and press it first. A lot of times I will just hold it so that the seam is open. I don't pull it too hard. Okay, so you can see that my seam slightly shifted up here, but that's going to be all taken out in the my trimming. So I'm going to do this and I will show y'all in just a minute how we clip this, and then we're going to baste it, and we'll be done for tonight. But I'm going to go ahead and take this over to my cutting table, and we're going to trim this down. So y'all can still see me over here, just trimming up everything to make sure everything's nice and straight. And like I said, you trim some off of each side as well as the top. So I actually have a ruler that's the exact same height as you're supposed to cut it at. So I can just lay it on top and trim it down all at once. Not have to measure up. That's a nice thing about that. And when I say it's a decent amount you trim off, it's actually a pretty good size. Probably about mm, close to half an inch you trim off. And now we trim off a little bit to each side. Okay, so we have, oops, wrong part. Brain's not want to look at. So I forgot what to trim the sides down to. So this is why you keep your pattern handy. Let's see. Okay, that's what it was. It's yet another reason why you pay attention. I think it's slightly shifted, which is always lovely. Just a tiny bit, like not even a 16th of an inch, but it's enough that it would drive me nuts later. So, yeah. So basically, what it comes down to is that you trim down about half an inch on three sides to get it to where it works. So we have it trimmed down so all the things are nice and pretty and straight. So now what we do, we take our left side, and if you notice, since we've trimmed everything down, it fits perfectly. Now I'm going to use pins just because these things like to move until I get to the vinyl pocket. Then I'll use clips. I don't use a lot, but since I'm sewing or basting on two of them, want to make sure it stays where it's supposed to. It's long and short of it. Now I do have pins right here, but I'm not going through the vinyl. So I just make sure to go up before that. But at the bottom here, I will have clips because that is very much the clear vinyl. All right, so, but I will use pins pretty much everywhere else because I don't like this to shift while I'm basting it on. Now, one thing I can talk about while I'm pinning is that this is our main fabric. If you look, it's curved. So after we get this on here, on the left-hand side, we are actually going to take our pattern piece and actually curve the corners. So be just like our main body. You actually take the main body pattern piece to curve it. Where did I just put that other? There it is. It's called when you set things down, you forget where you put them just a second ago. But we are just pinning that together. Are any questions so far? Hopefully I'm not boring y'all too much. So like I said, we're just gonna get this done, and next week we will attach the flap and the main body and all that stuff. And then hopefully do the second part of the turn lock. So I'm just pinning it all the way up. Very funny. Uh, what it was is I set that main body piece down on top of it, and that's why I couldn't see where I was looking for it. But hey, I'll walk out of the room and forget what I walked out for. So, all right. So just so you can see how it's pinned. So now I'm going to take and baste all the way around it so that it'll be secure. So I'm going to turn y'all back to the sewing machine. But we are just basting all the way around and getting that now. And I keep stabbing myself with the pins, apparently. Now, I did a first for me today is that I was putting snaps in a bunch of keychains and stitchable work trays, and actually stabbed myself with a cam snap. That was a first, and actually drew blood. So that was, like I said, a first for me. I've never done that in the 10 plus years I've been using cam snap. So that was definitely interesting. All right, we'll do our last side, and then we are going to be done for tonight after we go over everything we accomplished. Yeah, that was a first. But I was putting keychain snaps in 30 keychains and like 16 of my ort trays, so there was a lot of snaps. But I got them all done and they're all put up or packed up for orders. Somebody ordered 15 of the same key fob. So, all right, so that's where we're going to stop for tonight. Now, like I said, we'll actually take our main pattern piece and we will curve the edges. Actually, I'm going to use my little, I have this, which is about the same. It is the same curve. I have this from Sweetly Unique. She has these templates for a rounded corner. I'm actually going to go ahead and do that real quick. And I'm just going to draw them off using my little Sharpies because it disappears anyway because it's in the seam allowance. And that's actually easier than that paper. So we are just going to do that real quick. So I include a template, a paper, so you can print out a paper template for most of my patterns, but I use this or I use a spool of thread for the most time. I'm rounding out corners. I love this little thing. It's a little 2-inch ruler with the curve. Makes it easy for doing curved. Are there any tutorials for how to do the straw hats? All right, so we're going to trim this curve. All right, so just to show you, it's curved. Now this is my left hand side, which, or in other words, the one with the ID wallet, and it matches up with the curve for the outer body. Now, one thing I've had people ask me before is, how do you know, like when you look at this, so I can show you. So when you have the opening, everything is right side up. That's how I do mine. But that also means the main body piece. So I have a little notation that the curved marks should be where the directionality of the fabric is. So on the back side, it looks upside down, but for my sake, it doesn't matter. And I've never had a person complain about that. So really, a lot of this has to do with the directionality of how you're putting things together. Because I have accidentally gone, oh, it's upside down. And so I want it the same direction as my flap, if that makes sense. And in this case, it's the same direction as my flap on the outside and on the inside, because you can see the same person right here. I love directionality too. But that's the biggest thing with a lot of Lindsay's patterns is if they're directional. So like on my pattern pieces, I think I have written here, this is the top if it's directional fabric. That's actually what I wrote on there for myself so I don't forget, because I have done it enough times that by the time I went to add it, I went, oh, I put it on upside down. So it is something that comes up. So it does play into part. But yeah, I'll send you a message and definitely ask for help on that because I think it will add a lot to my dress. And can you tell I'm already in the Halloween mood? We're starting to decorate our stuff for the front yard. So I hope everybody has a good night and I will see you next week and hopefully we will mostly finish this pattern. And I'll talk to you later.